the water's fine, homie, jump into the deep end. Sow it, you will reap it. We talking how to start it, how to grow it, how to keep it. Take a deep breath. You are now rocking with Founder Secrets.
Matt.
Hey.
Welcome to Founder Secrets.
Thank you very much.
So such a pleasure. So we're going to start with an icebreaker. No Flavio today. We'll start with an icebreaker around what gives each of us the most energy. And I've actually thought about this quite a bit. And I think for me, that I put them in a few different buckets. So one is people. So I think that being with people, which I think feels like kind of an obvious answer for some of us who are more social, but being with people that I love, friends, family, my wife, that feels really, really good. But the level deeper that I thought about is what else? And it's when I solve problems that I've been thinking about for a long time. So for me, if I get a lot of satisfaction and a lot of joy, and I feel good about it for a long time when I've been thinking about something and something has been broken or is hard and we figured it out. And it doesn't have to be me figuring it out, figuring it out as a team. And I get so much joy and satisfaction out of that. But what about you? What gives you the most energy?
I mean, what you said totally resonates. I think that it's easy to remember like the big wins and the high moments, right? But like those feel in retro, like over the past decade, a lot of the best things that have happened in business or life sometimes feel in retrospect like sugar highs. Or you can look at like a spike and then it evaporates quickly and you're just on to dealing with reality, especially in business. And I think like real energy, if I had to give it a word to it, it'd be coming from creativity. But I think the specific type of creativity that gives me personal. Are we allowed to curse on the podcast? Okay, cool. The internet is a safe place. Like when you're in the shit, right? When your back is against the wall and there are no good solutions, right? Because like the best case scenario is long gone at this point and you have to figure your way through it, working together with people. But like really for me being, getting to be a voice of calm and leadership in that story, like really does give me energy because I feel in a weird way calmest or most energized or most alive in those moments. And so getting to work through something challenging, and, just make progress against that, I think really is energizing.
I love that. I think it's also a perfect segue into, sometimes on the pod, we have people on who have a very kind of a product that people can understand immediately. And I think that this is a prime example. So you started Wandering Bear over 10 years ago, right?
Right, yeah.
You co-founded it with someone from business school, it looked
Correct,
like.
yeah, Ben.
And so walk us through, like why you were kind of agency or you were doing consulting and then moved into this world. How'd that happen?
Yeah, totally. And you're reminding me, I guess people on the podcast might not know yet, we're drinking Wandering Bear coffee right now. And so maybe the literal answer.
It's on the video.
Maybe the literal answer to the energy question was probably Wandering Bear coffee for the past decade.
That's a good plug.
So I mean, the story, right? Consulting to business school to coffee entrepreneurship. As a consultant, I was a consultant in my early 20s, right out of college, and you get really cool exposure to some of the biggest businesses in the world in management consulting. But in my experience, one of the biggest knocks, I think, and one of the biggest challenges coming out and having that be your first thing is that as consultants, you're really supposed to know the answers. And it was never said to me, but I felt a culture where asking questions, where being naive, where being what I was somehow not exactly allowed, right? We had to know, or, and people around me, I'm sure did, I was the low man on the totem pole. But something about that, you were in an environment working with large companies, learning about business, but somehow I never really felt like I understood what was going on. I never felt like I was learning about business, even though I was working in businesses or for businesses. And so I went to business school to get my MBA, a little disenchanted and very curious and with a deep desire to get my hands dirty. Like if you fast forwarded 6 months to like Ben and I in a kitchen in Queens, like, knee deep in coffee grounds, trying to figure out how to evacuate like the first 500-gallon tank we ever purchased of all these coffee grounds. Like we got a little dirtier than probably we even thought we would. But it was a passion for coffee, a friendship kindled early on in school, and a shared desire to get our hands dirty and really build something that led us to take that initial risk. And people often ask me when the right time to start a business is. Mm-hmm. I get reached out to by actual consultants a lot. I'm on LinkedIn and talk, right. And so from all the, it's just, I'm a little bit of a beacon, I guess, sometimes on LinkedIn for consultants who want to reach out and just ask about the journey out of consulting. Mm-hmm. And, often the question is, when is the right time to start the business? And a lot of the time, I think it has to do with risk adjustment. When can you take that risk and balance that risk without having the counterbalance, the risk on the other side that be just super destructive to your life, to your happiness, to your mental well-being, to your financial situation. And so for us, having business school where we'd already taken this break from the professional world, where we had almost 2 years to dedicate to a project, right? To see how far can we get, allowed us to set the bar at a place that was actually pretty achievable. So we kept exceeding our goals, month over month for where we wanted this thing to be, to the point where by the time, graduation day came, it was pretty self-evident that this is what we were going to do full time.
But 10 years ago, there were tons of coffee companies,
not as many as there are today.
There are more today, but why coffee? Why? It's because you're passionate about it, but why'd you guys decide on coffee?
Gosh, it is a really, really cool category because it is so big. People drink coffee every day. That's an obvious statement. But one of the things we've learned over the years that may be less obvious is that trading among and within coffees and trying many different, that is part of the experience of being a coffee drinker, whether it's for convenience because it's the thing that is there when you need coffee at that moment, or because there are so many options. And so the challenge as a challenger brand in the coffee space is to figure out how to stand out, how to do something different to get your fair share or your fair shot at earning, a customer's attention and trial when they're, for the thing they're going to do anyway. So it's super challenging for that reason, but it's also a really fun, creative opportunity.
I watch a lot of Shark Tank, and I've probably watched every episode maybe of Shark Tank.
When we were starting the business, I would make my wife turn it, or she was my girlfriend at the time, but turn it off when I would be at a kitchen in Queens. This was 2013, 2014.
Yeah.
Shark Tank was in its mega prime. It's prime. I'd walk in and it would be on. I'd be like, you have to turn that off.
Why?
I can't have another person asking me about my gross margins already.
But one of the things they slam recently, especially on Shark Tank, are businesses that go into places like Costco. Businesses like this that are some D2C and some selling into retail, and they're like, retail's a bloodbath. But you're in a lot of retail.
Yeah, no, you can find Wandering Bear in Whole Foods, Sprouts, Costco. Yeah.
And you do these tours where you go in and sample for days and days, and you stand on your feet. What's that whole process like?
It can be a bloodbath. That's not wrong. We've had bloodbath like experiences in our history. I think at the core, the beauty of grocery and of retail channels is that you compared it to direct to consumer. Mm-hmm. They have done the customer acquisition for you. Right? The customer is inside the doors to shop. And so then it becomes your job to have, price, package, position on shelf that helps them buy. But, when the business is structured, product cost, your price, and your plan to support the retailer, when it is structured where everyone can win, it's a great business. It's just, it takes, it took us 10 years, right, to learn how to structure that. But, there's a lot of, so much is shared and known and can be said about what the right strategy is and the way to be measured and do it right. And then you're facing these first decisions and you just want to do it. And you just kind of hop in and you figure it out, and you might price it too low, or you might not fully understand what your cost is, or you might agree to promote it and fund it at a level that just eats up every penny of margin you could have hoped. You have to make some of those mistakes. We're fortunate we've been through some cycles and are being appropriately measured in how we're expanding grocery. It can be a bloodbath. It can also be a beautiful thing.
Can you go a level deeper on like what are if someone's just starting out and not necessarily just starting out, but maybe they're just starting out in grocery and they're going in, like what's a gotcha that maybe isn't evident or apparent up front, but you might learn after 5 or 10 years?
The biggest one is price relative to cost. I think the concept of economies in scale or economies of scale, like it's taught in school, right? But as you get into it, like this. Which sounds like is taught as a reality, like as you get bigger, your cost should go down, doesn't really factor in all of the realities of scaling the manufacturing of a product. The base one, which that, at a small scale, before you've really figured out what it looks like to manufacture at true commercial volumes, you don't really know what your cost structure is. It can be very hard to understand even what that baseline is. And so I think the number one pitfall in all wholesale relationships is essentially pricing it wrong, right? Where there's not enough margin in it for the brand when you've priced it too low relative to your costs on assumptions that your costs are going to go down when they very well might not, or where some parts might go down and others parts might go up. And related to that you in certain situations could be forced into funding the sales that, either through promotional pricing or slotting fees, actual cash or free goods paid to get on shelf, at a level that just isn't sustainable. And so everyone has to win. The brand has to make enough money to run the company, to, support marketing. The retailers need to make their money. The distributors have to make their money. And so really understanding what good looks like for everyone and setting price and product up for success from day one is number one most critical.
And you raised some money, right?
We did.
How did you decide? How did you go through that process of not just raising the money, but deciding, hey, we want to bring on investors because, of course, they bring in their own experiences and opinions, and now you have to answer to people who are peers with you. What was that thinking like? So
it's been very incremental. I mean, it's been done as we have needed capital for growth over the years. So it was not, one decision. It was many decisions. The simple one is, well, do you need money?
Right.
Like,
it starts there.
If you need money, like you have a couple ways that you could get it through profit, right? You could get a loan or you could raise equity capital, right? And so, for us, when we started, we did not raise money when we were starting the business in grad school. Like that was what we started as, right? Wandering Bear version 1.0. We were the first subscription service for premium iced coffee, cold brew for offices. So, door to door around New York City, it's like a University of Michigan, Go Blue cooler bag over my shoulder that we got for free from Uline with like our first $500 purchase of equipment, right? For our first with a cooler bag over my shoulder going, office to office, door to door in New York City. We signed up something like 20 office subscription accounts in our first month.
You did that.
Ben and I did that.
You went door to door and said, hey, would you like to buy a subscription?
One of my friends was studying for some medical exam at the time. So she had some time on her hands. I had her curate a playlist, sit with me in a zip car, and she would actually like sit in the car while it was double parked as we were like literally driving around the city in a makeshift Uber delivery vehicle, delivering samples. Like Ben and I, we set out to make 50 of these boxes. Our first product was essentially this, right? What's sitting on the table now, a 16 serving box of cold brew. We set out to make 50, got 20 out of them. A lot of loss on that first one, 60% loss rate. Not sustainable. Those 20 units were marked 1 through 20 and 20 samples were delivered. Did the same thing the next week, another 20, probably like close to 50% close. I mean, like very high close rate on these samples.
Close 50%.
I mean, I'd have to go look back at the it was a very high. We found product market fit in the office channel very, very quickly. That was the business.
What was your pitch? You'd walk in and say what?
Try this. So, I mean, for us, it has always been, you ask how you stand out in like a competitive category. For us, it has always been about taste, number one. Use good ingredients, brew it right, make a great tasting product. And then we've stood out in market through packaging. We identified very early on, like the only way to make sure that the customer is going to get a great tasting product is to package it to stay fresh. So we figured out packaging that would keep air and light away from the coffee so that it would stay fresh for longer. Now we've scaled that significantly. Like freshness is core to the reason why our product tastes so good. Because if you can see it, air and light make the coffee go stale. And so it was all about taste. We'd walk into the office. We'd say, hey, friend, fellow business school classmate or friend from undergrad or friend of a friend that got connected to us over email. Who's the office manager here? Can we pour them a cup of coffee? Can we put this in the fridge? Here's a sheet. I'll follow up with an email. Let's just see what happens. The first, we priced it way too low to start.
What was the price?
I truly don't even want to say.
Much too low.
We priced it way too low to start. The first 3 calls we made, converted immediately. We're like, okay, we have to raise our price.
Because it was below cost.
It was just way too low. We have to raise it. And then, so we structured, and so, by the time we got back to school that summer, I think we had something like 50 direct subscription accounts. B2B is like a coffee as a service offering. They were paid, at the time, the program was pay 8 weeks at a time. So you paid for 8 weeks up front. We delivered the next 8 weeks. So as I quickly learned, that helps you be cash flow positive, negative net working capital, as I learned later in accounting. And so we didn't need to raise money initially, back to your initial question, but we also weren't paying ourselves. Right. And it became clear very quickly that in order to compete in a category that was where other brands were raising a lot more money than us. I mean, we've never been the most capitalized brand in the space. That we needed the ability to really invest, to start building out a team, to start thinking about future products, to be able to invest in inventory, to serve larger customers. So that was the initial push, about a year and a half in to raise investor money for the first time.
And how did you figure these things out, right? Or are you a chemist or chemistry is probably not the right, but how did you figure out all of these things about, okay, the key to, coffee tasting good is no air, no light getting in. Did you just figure that out, or what was that like?
So curiosity will take you a long way, especially when it's earnest. And packaging is my favorite example. Because anyone who's in the packaging industry knows a ton about packaging and has almost no one to talk to about it. Imagine going home, you sell boxes, right? Your kids really want to talk to you about the different fluting on various types of corrugate. Probably not. But guess what? A really curious, 25-year-old wanting to learn everything that you have learned over a 30-year career. The guy I learned stuff on hour and a half calls, pretty much about everything we needed to know from people directly in the industry, just based on their willingness to share these topics that, maybe a month prior were not so interesting to me, and all of a sudden were the only thing I could think about. That combined with trial and error in a pretty good generalist mentality where it's just well, we're going to try a bunch of things and figure it out and ask what we did wrong when it messes up. It was a lot of trial and error. And I think, Ben and I would probably both agree, our desire to get our hands dirty, to really be in it, to be doing it, to be away from, the MBA program in a factory, making a product. I think we carried that a little too far, to be honest. I wouldn't do it again. If being who I was then, I didn't have a choice. Being who I am now, you just know that there are ways to professionalize faster, right? And I think one of the questions always is, well, making sure that as you're doing it the really scrappy way, you have a very clear vision about what that next phase is so that you don't extend the utility of being overly scrappy beyond its useful life, right? I think being scrappy is necessary because you make progress fast and you prove that you can do it and you spend less money and often less time. But then you start spending a lot of time if you stay in that, mode. Manufacturing, for example, ourselves, with Ben and I being the de facto production managers running shifts, at the brew house, that happened went on for longer than it needed to.
But a lot of entrepreneurs never let go of that, of what they like, or, it's easy to let go of the things we don't like at all, right?
Sure.
Or, yeah, please take finance away. But the things that maybe we enjoy, we have passion in, it's almost the hardest thing to give up.
And I think that's totally appropriate as long as you are actually the best person to be doing that for whatever the interests of the business are. I'm not good at running a factory. That's just not me. It's just a language I needed to stop pretending I was going to be that person.
So you've talked about Ben. You and him started the business together. I have had 3 companies. I've had co-founders in all the companies, and I'm now married, and so I can now say this. It is a lot like a marriage, and in some ways, it's it's even harder than a marriage in some ways, because the lives are so intertwined and financially, and, you know, our pride and, you know, it is very, very similar. Yet we spend years likely dating someone before we marry them. And a lot of people don't know their co-founders all that well before they you know, get married effectively. How did you come to, you know, how did the two of you and Ben, decide, okay, we're going to start this business? Was it one of your ideas? Did one of you push the other one? Did you decide to do it together? And then, you know, 10 years in now, what has made it so successful?
Yeah, I totally agree with the marriage analogy. I've been married 8 years. So Ben and I have been married longer than me and me and my wife. He's been married 6 years. Yeah, we were friends first. So like in a way, we dated before we got married, I think. You know, one of the things that was most fun, and I think is really fun about co-founder relationships, and is why I don't think I could ever envision starting a business myself, and I don't think I'd want to, is because work is less like work and more like play when you're doing it with friends, with that level of camaraderie, honesty, openness. And, you know, we talked earlier about being in the shit. Mm-hmm. Like, you know, always knowing that you have someone in the trenches with you, sharing both the same highs, lows, risk profile, commitment. That is its own psychological release valve that is necessary, because I can't imagine where that would have gone. Like where that stress, where that mental stress and strain would have, or how long it would have built up in countless scenarios if there wasn't someone who you could pick up the phone or be sitting across from and talk to that was there with you, where like context was not needed to, like, you didn't have to explain why it mattered. Mm-hmm. You didn't have to explain the backstory. It's like, it's a sentence. This just happened. And you know, bad thing A just happened. And both of you feel the same emotion at the same time. Like you're just into processing dialogue. What do we do? You know, it's been you know, obviously one of the most important relationships in my life, and I think, you know, it is the fact that we are, you know, still great partners and in business together. I think is some of a product of some of those like initial notions of like, yes, just I can work with this person, right? Having been proven true time and time again over the course of a decade. You know, one thing I will say is that over a long term, right? Like a founding relationship needs to be complementary, but also stable. And I think at the beginning, it was easy to look at Ben and I as very, very similar, right? Similar background, similar skill sets, you know, probably similar personality quadrants, like just not, you know, if you were to say, okay, how do we counterbalance, you know, based on, you know, skills, like, okay, we need a finance person, a marketing person, an operations person, like that wouldn't have worked. But what did work is the fact that we balance each other out in terms of kind of like wavelength and emotional response in different situations. We process information a bit differently. He's a slower processor. I'm a faster processor. We approach organization very differently. He's more trees. I'm more forest. And these are things that we've learned over the years, that combined with like respect for each other. And what I will always say is Ben's incredibly low ego, have made for a very stable and productive co-founder marriage.
And do you think that some of that was the fact that you all were friends up front? Do you think some of it was luck? Do you like what do you attribute that or great communication, or what do you attribute kind of that long-term success to?
Haven't spent all that much time thinking about it. I'll come back and like say if this proves wrong, but like it might just be as simple as something like shared values, like similar to what would make a marriage work, right? Similar value system, shared vision of the future, commitment to a partnership to like act in accordance with values to achieve the vision of the future. Like that's what a family unit should be. Like that would be my criteria to any of my friends being like, hey, should I marry this girl or guy? Like, you know, it's like, well, do you want the same things? Right? Are you going to work together to make those things real? Like, so I think that here's so funny. Like, it's not like we had these conversations 10 years ago. It was felt, it was unspoken, but it was true. And it was accurate.
Love that. shifting gears a bit, COVID impacted a lot of, coffee businesses.
A lot of businesses,
period.
Especially businesses that like to sell coffee to offices.
Yes. So what was that like going through, in the business? How were you able to adapt? What was that like?
I mean, it's not really an exaggeration to say the pandemic crushed Wandering Bear 1.0. I mean, more than 70% of our sales was our cold brew to offices. So, on March 10th, 2020, we had customers, and by March 15th, we didn't. It went from that to zero just immediately. We thought it was going to be 3 weeks. That ended up being more or less 3 years, where that part of the business was fallow. But crisis is always opportunity if you want to see it that way. We used it as an opportunity to do some things that we had wanted to do or known we needed to do for a long time, and other things we never thought we would do. Things we needed to do or sensed we needed to. Like if we look back at the culture of Wandering Bear prior to the pandemic, because we sold coffee in multiple channels, we had an early but growing grocery business, and we had the core office business. The team felt very siloed, right? There was just a lack of connection and unity of mission, and it was like, from my view, like going into it felt strained. And so the pandemic gave us an opportunity to really bring all of our focus and mission together again, like in the shit with really no good options. Like, what did we decide to do? We decided to take our brand, make it even more of a consumer brand, really lean into the things we have always been, right? Big, smooth, fresh coffee, packaged in interesting ways, and sell to customers online. So we took all of that energy and very fortunate support from our investors to get through, a rapid evaporation of revenue and runway. And within 6 months had relaunched Wandering Bear as wanderingbear.com. And we're off to the races, by mid 2020, building a direct to consumer digital first business that we're, very fortunate to have been able to scale over the coming, 18 months to a level, nearly 4 times where we had been with the business prior to COVID. So, went from where we were down close to zero, and then was able to build back up, with a really focused and great team that was committed to making the changes that needed to be made. Good support from our investors to see us through a new strategy, and then a consumer that needed coffee at home. And so that really set up everything that we're doing today.
How'd you keep the negative thoughts at bay? How did, both for yourself and also I'm sure that there were people inside the company and on your board and others who were like, this is really, really bad. How were you able to, your back's against the wall. What were you able to use to keep those thoughts at bay and to stay positive?
I think if I'm transporting myself back to that time, which I'm sure we all can do with like pretty vivid imagery, right? Mm-hmm. Like we took a pretty firm, like health and family first type of approach where it's like in all discussions, it was just like, are you healthy? Is your family okay? And beyond that, like everything was fine. It's like, because we were fortunate, like our team, families were healthy, everyone was healthy, everyone felt safe and secure, and like we were able to provide some visibility into what we were doing as a business and tried to get people as comfortable with the uncertainty in the business as possible. You asked the question. I'm a little bit of a contrarian. When I'm the negative one, I try not to be, but I'm the negative one when things are going really well, right? Like that's when I have trouble keeping the negative thoughts at bay, when things are going great. When things are going really, really bad, I think I have trouble seeing the reason to like acknowledge the negativity. Like it's when things are like really bad, it's just like the worst thing you could say is indifference. It's like, okay, like at a minimum, I'm indifferent to very positive about what the prospect could be. I think, we'd have to get a couple other people I work with closely to like validate that. But like I try to be, I'm trying to be, I guess maybe more about like less of a downer in the good times. And then I don't know, maybe more of like a realist in the bad. I don't know. But like, when in the pandemic, when it was really, really dark, it's like this will work or it won't. Like it just, just kind of what it was.
Very straightforward.
Yeah.
You have a lot of social media posts about these Costco, like 12, 14 hours. You're in person. I guess they're called road shows.
Yes.
At Costco stores. And I'm curious what that is like.
It's an absolute time warp is what it's like. Just like put yourself in a Costco for 12 hours, 4 days.
No windows.
No windows, just like overhead lighting, and like it doesn't really matter where you are. You could be in Hawaii or you could be in Alaska. Like it's just like it's a Costco. Like it feel like any part
They're all the same.
Yeah, maybe like more Axes versus Hawaiian shirts or something. But like at the end of the day, like it's the same. It is such God, like you talk about your customer as a brand owner so much, and you put your customer on this pedestal, and you're looking at this archetype that you've created of who this person is. But for all that talk, I mean, if we really think about it, the amount of time that you're like standing there belly to belly with your customer, hearing them talk, hearing them react immediately, unfiltered, giving like zero fucks, right? Right? Just
like, oh, I don't like it.
Like they're on their shopping trip, like having a fun time at Costco on a Saturday. Like they do not care who you are, and like, they don't care that you're the CEO, that they're talking. Like they don't know often. Mm-hmm. It's like undercover boss, and so it's. I mean, I can't think of another in our decade running the business, an opportunity like it to be in front of literally tens of thousands of customers with product sampling, hearing reactions. It's so valuable, not just for what it does for the Costco business. It is an investment brands will make to, maybe dial it back just 1 second, like what a roadshow is at Costco. Simply, it's like a 4-day event. You bring in the products that you want to sell and sample, and you take out, you sell what you sell and you take out what you don't. And so you essentially get to set up a mini trade show or a one brand farmers market inside of an individual Costco for 4 days on a weekend. And a Costco might have, over the course of that weekend, 20,000. A busy one could have 30 or 40,000 people coming through the door. And that's members actually. So like family, high traffic. Mm-hmm. And so, the opportunity to get the brand in front of that many people, get that much feedback, have to practice your 3-second elevator pitch that many times. I mean, for any salesperson, you're going to leave that experience way sharper than you entered. Like there's just no way you can.
What was surprising about you when you went to your first one? Expectations versus the reality.
Expectations versus reality. It was even more exhausting than I thought it would be. What was interesting, I think a lot of, and some of this might be Costco specific, but a lot of preconceived notions about, less about who your customer is. Like the people that you were, that you just like look across the aisle and say, yep, our customer. You pretty good at spotting like the people that are definite yeses. But the people that you would have pegged as no's, whether it's because, age or, family makeup or how busy they looked or whatever, like the reception was just like on the whole more positive. One of them was just age. It's like, we typically think of our brand as a bit of a millennial brand, people in their 30s, young families, like that tends to be the core. And, definitely sold like more than a dozen to octogenarians. Like, I mean, just like this is very caffeinated coffee. This is surprising me, but like you're all about it and I'm here for it. Like that was surprising. And also just like it's always refreshing. You spend so much time in the weeds talking about your industry. To recognize that for us, we sell cold brew coffee. It's a type of iced coffee. We like to think it's like the best and most premium type of iced coffee. We think everyone has heard of cold brew and knows what it is because Starbucks and Dunkin' have been selling it since 2016, 2017. That's just not the case. 50-50 on whether they can recognize the term and even less if they could tell you what the difference is. And that's just a good reminder, right? That, when you're in any industry, like the curse of knowledge, right? You speak in a way presuming this thing because you can't see a world where everyone hasn't been living it in some form or fashion just in the world you've been, right? So, I think that was always a helpful reminder.
How do you continue to stay relevant in a space that keeps changing? We talked a little bit about COVID. That's an obvious change, but there are other, there are trends like Starbucks is going through some ups and downs right now. How do you stay up, not just in the industry trends, but how do you keep the business right at the forefront, in a changing industry?
try to listen to feedback we're getting from our customers, including like wholesale customers too, like what is working, what is not working, trying to come up with thesis as to why. You assemble data points, right? Okay, this type of product, you hear from one retailer, well, we're seeing a lot of success with this type of product, or you see on Amazon search trends, like protein is going crazy. And you start to, when you start to hear data points repeatedly, then you start to try and develop a thesis around it and say like, well, why might this be? Right. And, that is one useful tool. But I would also say like for us, figuring out how to stay relevant or keep growing in a crowded and competitive category that has headwinds, or shifting consumer behaviors is one is trying to stay focused on the things we do well, because there's always opportunity, when you're a small and growing brand in your core. Like it's pretty, I think, short-sighted to think that at any small, medium-sized business level of scale in an $80 billion category that you're near the top of anything you're doing. Right. So I think, staying relevant sometimes becomes a shiny object for like, okay, well, let's just grow through innovation and screw product proliferation. And so I think, some of it's a bit of a counterbalance. It's like, well, how can we do even better with the things we have? And then, I think we talked about this a little bit earlier. One of the ways that you break through is by giving the customer a new opportunity to try your product. In something, it's again, in coffee, like they're drinking coffee anyways. So it's looking for ways that we can serve different needs or serve different channels. So if like, for example, right now we don't sell a lot of coffee to what we would call commercial food service, right? So bars, restaurants, cafes, businesses that sell product for consumption, right? We sell a lot of coffee, obviously, to places that don't sell the product, that give it away, like offices. That's because our product's too expensive for a company that's looking to make a profit on the thing they're selling to sell it. So we see an opportunity through some innovation to be able to deliver a type of product into that channel at a lower cost that would enable them to make, win-win, make the money they need, and give us an opportunity to get our brand in front of customers when they're buying, say, cups of cold brew at a bakery, for example. So it's just looking for opportunities to expand your market.
One of my close friends believes that the CEO's job is to allocate resources, time, money, those types of things. But really it boils down to judgment, and that good CEOs have good judgment, and that when the business is small, the decisions, they have a big impact, but they also kind of don't, because it's like small business and it doesn't really matter. But as the business grows, the number of shiny objects, as you pointed out, can really grow, right? It's like, oh man, we could expand the business 30% if we go, way over here, if we go into protein, or if we go into these things. And in his mind, he's been on the pod, it's judgment of the CEO to decide, okay, what is the right path to go? Do we stick here? Do we stick to the current customers? Do we expand the current, how do you think of that?
No, it's super interesting. So, this podcast is called Founder Secrets, right? Mm-hmm. Here's the founder secret. You'll have the same job title the entire time you're a founder, but your job description will change. And that took me a long time to realize, to accept that even though I've had the same expectations of myself for the past decade, that I have changed as a founder or as a CEO, and that the business's needs of me have changed as well. And so I think that's really astute. And I think it's probably like the biggest, we were talking earlier about, before we started rolling, about the difference between founders and hired guns. Mm-hmm. And I've spent a lot of time recently with hired guns, because I'm very curious about that, because the notion of someone being hired just to be the CEO, to be the one hired for judgment, right? Like, well, what makes that person different? And totally related to judgment, what I've gathered, the difference between maybe a founder and a hired gun, often hired in our context, maybe to replace the founder, to get the business to a level that the founder couldn't, right? Is speed of decisions powered by trust in judgment. And so my framing of what you shared is that, the CEO's highest and best responsibility is to make decisions, hopefully good decisions, but quickly, because the amount of time both in terms of opportunity cost for lost progress, but also time just spent gyrating in the cycles of analysis and decision making and waiting to see what will happen, are a killer. And so making decisions quickly based on judgment is just absolutely critical. And it like really hard to do. And I think something that, I wish we could do even better. Trying to put structures around this to enforce decisions. How have I approached this? One is like accepting that, right? And like, knowing that in my capacity, sometimes a decision is just needed, and in my capacity, it's not like this can't just be consensus anymore. Like, let's just make a decision and move. But then also creating some accountability, like mechanisms where it's like, guys, what is the like, let's set a public decision deadline for this opportunity. Who's my decision accountability person, whether it's Ben or another person on our leadership team? Like, how do we make sure that big things that we need to move forward on don't drag?
As you've grown the team, how have you, what have you learned about managing people, especially when it's probably a business, won't speak for you, but a lot of founders feels very personal to us. When we started the business, maybe you name the business that, you're like, well, I designed that. And, what's your management style as the business has grown in terms of recruiting these people in? You mentioned a leadership team. How do you approach the leadership team and empower them and make them feel like they have part of the business too?
I think one of the most important transitions we experience, but you talk about just key people and hiring great people, having the confidence to hire great people, to hire people that know more than you, might be better than you at something that you did for a period of time. So like that is something to get through if you're not there already, but is a major game changer, right? When you staff function, every key function of the business with someone who could do it better than you when you were the one wearing that hat, because you're wearing all the hats. And so taking like a pride versus pain and relinquishing the hat is like a big, I think, founder transition point for some. And I know it was for me. Mm-hmm. Cause to the point of getting hands dirty, there was absolutely a period of time with every seat I sat in at the business, which has been all of them, where I loved the fact that I was getting to get my hands dirty doing this thing, mm-hmm. learning this thing, and being like, hey, I'm actually like not bad at this, right? But like there's a big difference between not bad and professional, right? And so that is one big one. And then, empowering them, both, with your trust and with real responsibility and ownership over their thing, but then to also be a cross-functional leader. I think one of the biggest things where we've made progress since building, a real senior leadership team is creating not just like forums for, but expectations that they will support and work with each other to make each other better and to bring questions, support, past experiences to bear for everyone else's function. So really creating a team rather than a bunch of individual functional experts, I think has been one really important thing for us.
That's awesome. I want to go back to something you said or at the beginning. It says on your website that you all invented the cold brew box. That's quite slick. How did that happen?
Truly, to our knowledge, and maybe we will learn something when this airs, right? To our knowledge, we are the first people to put cold brew coffee in, simply put, like, bag and box wine style coffee on tap packaging, right? What you're looking at on the table if you're watching the video. That was a very, here's the real story of how that unfolded. In March of 2014, Ben and I were invited to participate in a Shark Tank style pitch competition at Columbia. The prize was $7,000. To Tarantino it, go to the end and then come back. We won the competition and started the business with that $7,000 check.
Wow.
So that's how Wandering Bear started. When we signed up to join the competition, we had a name and a category. We knew we wanted to be in cold brew coffee. We knew the company was Wandering Bear. We did not know what our angle was yet at that point in time. We knew what we wanted to do at a high level was take the quality that was now like for the first time available at coffee shops for this, best cup we could buy and make it easy for people to have that at home and at work. I was sitting in a buddy of mine's office on a weekend talking about this. He points over to the water cooler, like a Culligan, glass water cooler setup. Is like, well, could you put it in something like that? And my immediate reaction was no, but maybe like a version of that, like maybe the Brita taps that go in the fridge. Mm-hmm. So maybe a smaller version. And then it was only a very small leap to say like, I wonder if we could put it in boxes like they do box wine. And I called Ben and I could hear him clicking on the other end. He starts Googling. He's like, is anybody doing that? Like, does this, like, don't tell me this, like, exists already. And we very quickly determined, like, no, it doesn't. Like, this was going to be our thing. And so that was that first innovation. And the first place we found real market fit for it was in offices.
And do you think it's because of the format or because it looks cool or because it's easy for somebody to understand or it's just different? Nobody else is doing it?
Totally. I mean, the box matters for a couple very functional reasons. One is that it keeps the coffee fresh. Mm-hmm. By keeping air and light away, you keep the coffee fresh for longer. So if it tastes great when we make it, it's going to taste great when you pour it. Like that's just a promise. And then also it turns, a jug of coffee into a keg of coffee. All of a sudden you have coffee on tap at the push of a button. And, if it's sitting on the refrigerator shelf, all you have to do is push the little red button and coffee comes out and it creates a much more product-like experience versus what you would typically get, from a bottle of coffee or a pot of coffee even. So something about, the ability to give coffee on tap experience and maintain quality through some of just the functional attributes of the package are what really set it apart.
A lot of brands are pushing sustainability now. They're worried about single-use plastics and they're worried about some of these things. How do you all approach that?
We've always had the benefit, I think, of being, ahead of the worst parts of the consumer. We've always been in multi-serve. So single-use plastic, correct. Like we have always been selling large multi-serve units of product, right? And we've always been, just by virtue of what we've been looking for in packaging, right? Like, again, keeping air and light out, have been in this realm of flexible packaging, which has a lot of very credible, credentials when it comes to lower carbon impact. It's a very challenging conversation in consumer goods around sustainability because at the end of the day, we all produce products through processes that cause emissions. We ship them around on trucks and boats and trains, and they all come in packaging. Mm-hmm. And so like you're always on a spectrum of just trying to do less bad of a thing that is already, like if you were a real purist about it, we'd all be, and you loved coffee, we'd all be living on coffee farms in South America, just taking care of our trees, roasting them on solar power roasters. And it's like you could get there, right? But like, we're just not going to do it as a society. And so it's how do we make the thing that, yes, it's going to cause emissions, it is going to yield some waste. How do we make it as less bad as possible? Right. And that's always where we've been, and had the benefit of using, things like, post-consumer recycled boxes and, flexible packaging and trying to eliminate plastic where we can to try and make the best decisions we can within the constraints.
Makes sense to me. How, you're involved in, peer groups like YPO. You seem to be fairly active in kind of the media circuit and doing all this. The road shows. There are a lot of things demanding your time. You have a real business to run. You have a wife, kids. How do you decide what to invest your time in? What's that thought process like?
I wish I could tell you some really a really good matrix or something. The best thing I've found in recent time, the past year or so, is being very rigorous about the calendar for one specific reason. And by rigorous, I mean trying to put everything that needs to get done onto the calendar. One, in doing that, like at some level, you're going to get your priorities into time slots. you'll quickly realize, as I did, that you have far less time than you think you do, which is, I think, is just the fundamental realization is we have less time than we think. But the most important thing that does is it forces you to analyze trade-offs. And there's always an opportunity cost to your time. And so, for example, at 5:30 p.m. on my calendar every day, Monday through Thursday, it says walk home for a half hour. It takes me 15 minutes, but I know it's going to take a little longer to pack up, do that last thing. So walk home. And then at 6 p.m. it says teach Jack to read. Jack is my 5-year-old son, my oldest. And we're learning to read right now. And so I know, just like is for one example, that anytime I'm going to schedule something that's going to overlap that, it's going to be a trade-off with me teaching my son to read. And so the question is like, what is more important? Sometimes tonight I have an event. I've decided it's an important event. That's a trade-off I'm making. But I think the important thing is to create some sort of system, an honest one, where you can actually look and weigh A versus B, not everything versus everything, but just on a rolling basis. What do I want to be doing? Is it this or is it that? And the only way I found to do that honestly is through a calendar.
As we kind of wrap up the question side here, I think you have a very interesting brand. If you go to the website, it's kind of loud, like
big. It's big.
It's big. It's got. I love the colors. I ran a marketing agency before this business for 12 years. Built hundreds of websites, a lot of brands, like big and small, and so I just love a website. Like a website that's really functional. I think is very, very good, but a website that has a voice and feels different than others. And I'm curious where that came from. Was that you or Ben or was that an agency that brought that in? Designer, like what? Because it's a distinct kind of feel. Where'd that come from?
So it is a living, breathing thing. I think that's the first. The brand you see today is not the brand it always was on the surface, but somehow at the core it is. So it's like been this linear path. To answer your question specifically, like how did that come to be? When the pandemic happened and we needed to go from being a predominantly B2B brand to a consumer facing brand, we needed to figure out what we were and bring that to the forefront in a way visually and through copy. And so we worked both internally and then with some creatives that we had relationships with that understood the brand for a long time, as well as a creative agency to bring a fresh perspective. And it's kind of this like triad, right? Brand owner, and now, they brought customers into the conversation. So this like kind of exploration of what ended up being this North Star document about like, well, what is it that we're trying to say? We came up with what you see today, which is exactly that. It's, today we would say Wandering Bear is, big, smooth coffee box to stay fresh. We are big, right? Like that is like the first word. Like our products are big. Our font is bold. Our statements are big, like a bear, right? And that's just we try to get that to come through.
You have testimonials on the site.
But the testimonials are all real. So like we, like the decisions as CEO, I would say the other, key role of a CEO sometimes is to like really throw down the gauntlet in terms of direction of travel and say like, okay, guys, let's acknowledge we are not, what I'm about to say is not true of us today, but this is what we need to be. And this is a top priority. And one of the early ways I remember doing that back in 2020 is we were launching the direct to consumer site saying 10-star customer service. Like we are all about connection to the customer, great customer service on every interaction. What that led to before, we brought on a wonderful CX lead and started building out that team was our entire team, myself included, spending hours of their week in the customer service inbox, responding to whether it's Facebook comments or emails. My point in that saying we're very close to the, still our Slack channels are full of, customer review quotes. So everything you read, like, especially the more, sometimes people are just so creative, right? So it's like, I can't even take credit for like, our best lines often come from, customer reviews or Facebook comments. We take a lot of pride in that.
You started as a B2B business. COVID kind of forced this push to B2C. And now there are a lot of people thinking, offices are coming back. And so how do you see it as, one brand kind of serving two quite different customers?
So it's one brand, right? The customer, and the customers that we're serving, regardless of whether it's B2B or B2C, now, as we look at the business today, are buying in and their customers are buying in because of the brand. So, today our B2B channels are, nearing the size of our direct to consumer business. Like they're growing wonderfully. Offices are back. Like it's a wonderful part of our business that we love and are incredibly excited about. And grocery stores, as we talked earlier, like are a growing and bigger part of the business. For us, it's all about how do we get that brand into the cups of more consumers.
Awesome. All right, we'll end with the life hack and then do a plug. So have that ready. So a life hack that can be anything that has made a difference in your life. I'll go first. I just moved, so I lived in New York City for 8 years. My wife and I moved to Orange County, Newport Beach, about 3 weeks ago. So all very, very new. And one of the things we wanted to do was get a new bed. So I've always had queen beds, and I wanted a king bed. That was life goal. So, a whole process to get there. But so that figure out what the bed is. But then I started asking people, and one of my friends, actually two of my friends now, they said, hey, we experimented with this new style of sleeping, and it changed our lives. And I was like, okay, say more. And they said, it's a Scandinavian sleep style. They're like, you can Google it. Don't believe me? Just Google it. And I said, okay, but just tell me, what is it? And they said, it works like this. So you get a king or a queen, it works at either size bed. But each person, so, my wife and I, gets their own duvet and their own little sheet. So you get a little duvet and a little sheet. It's like a twin. And so we each get our own. They're independent. You have one main sheet, just like a normal fitted sheet that goes over the whole bed, and then you overlay them. So when we get up in the morning, we kind of lay it so it looks like one big contiguous duvet, but in reality it's two. And what it has created is that there's no more fights in the middle of the night over the sheet or the blanket or what have you.
It's like you heard my conversation with my wife this morning. I think something's broken with our. Something is wrong. I'm not the culprit she's accusing me of being.
Yeah, I had that conversation many times, and unbelievable. Can't the two guys who did it or tell me about it, and I was like, there's no way it's that good. It's that good. It made such a difference that now, when Michelle and I go somewhere, go to a hotel or something that has a normal setup, we're like, oh, it's terrible. So highly recommend that. That's my life hack. Just kind of investigating it or looking into it. Scandinavian sleeping, basically. What kind of life hack do you have?
All right, so this is one you gave me a minute to think about, and so here's the best that I came up with. Late last year, I was feeling a bit overwhelmed by just the news, and maybe that is a common sentiment, mm-hmm. right? And for context, and I think truly, I've never told Ben this, but my co-founder Ben, I always would have observed him really deep in the New York Times. And I always we've never talked about his news reading, but I've always really thought he was a news reader. I always really respected him for that. And so that really inspired me a decade ago to start reading a lot more news, right? Well, maybe reached a crescendo, right? Last fall. At a similar time, I'm maybe a year into Fabio and I have talked about this, our longevity journeys, mm-hmm. right? And so the concept of diet, it was something that was very familiar. And I just spending a lot of time thinking about, but I realized I wasn't spending a ton of time thinking about the information I was allowing into my brain, right? So my information diet. And so I did a bit of an audit and set some new standards, late last year, heading into this year for what my information diet was going to be. And one of those was really cutting out news, limiting podcasts, limiting short form content, really focusing on conversations with people, focusing on movies versus miniseries, focusing on books on topics versus podcasts on topic, things like that. And while I will admit it has made me a little bit more ignorant in certain conversations than I would like to be, on the whole, it has completely changed my mental makeup, outlook, the way I'm engaging in thought. Right. Starting the day with 30 minutes in a book versus on a website, very, very different. And so, at whatever level, I think some sort of, I think it's a little bit of a happiness hack, just given the news cycle. But I think it's also allowed me to go much deeper into areas I'm interested in, whether it's fitness or business or, yeah, it's been powerful.
Awesome. Where can people find you online? How can they find out more about Wandering Bear? Do your plug.
Yeah, of course. You can find us in grocery stores, at Whole Foods, Sprouts, Costco. You can find us at wanderingbear.com, at Wandering Bearco on all socials. Thanks for having me. This has been really fun.
Thanks for coming on. Thanks, Matt.
Appreciate it.
Thank you for rocking with the homies. Taylor, Trusty, and Flavio. Seize the day, own it. Until next time, hold it down, hold it down. Hey.